Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram at tokyostationpens, and on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
And my name is Jacob. I am foodafan on Instagram, and on Twitter I have a blog at foodafan.com.
And this, I believe, is episode 30. So thank you again, everybody, so much for listening in. I mean, we've been doing this now for just over a year now, and that wouldn't be possible without everybody's support. So thank you all very, very much. And we do have some reviews that we want to read today. Before I get there, we're almost running out of reviews to read. I think I've just got like 5 or 6 more reviews left. But
are we running out of all the reviews, or are we running out of the 5-star reviews?
No, all of the reviews. We have all 5-star reviews except for one,
okay.
The one that said we were too political.
Okay.
But let me read this review. So they say 5 stars, as if an informative tour guide took you by the hand and took you pen shopping. Funny, cute, informative podcast about the Japanese fountain pen scene that is often inaccessible due to language barrier for Western audiences. CY and Jacob are extremely well informed on not only the news, but also the fun dramas of the world of fountain pens and inks in Japan. Great balance between the two hosts makes it enjoyable and fun to listen to. If you love fountain pens, it's definitely worth a try. If you love Japanese fountain pens, you must give it a try. My only sadness is that it is only updated once every 2 weeks. I jest. It takes a lot of effort to make content like this. There's no shortage of quality here. And the review is written by Zakwile. I'm sorry, I cannot say this name. I know who it is. I know exactly who it is. But I can't say this name. I don't know how to pronounce it. In the United States. So this was written in February. Thank you so much, Zakwile, for your awesome and very detailed review. We appreciate it a lot.
So is this the first time our podcast has been called cute?
No, it is not. I think it's the second or third time. All right. And then the second one that I want to read is 5 stars. It's from Australia, so it's not from the United States, which is always great to see that we have such a variety in terms of geography. This one is sent in by D. the Besten via Apple Podcasts in March, and it was submitted on March 1st, and the title is Well Done, Alessa. This episode is great with good, vibrant discussion.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well done indeed. Thank you. And for all of you, we have this tradition of reading reviews, but we're running out of reviews to read, which means you, dear listener, we need you to help us write reviews. And, just takes maybe about 3 minutes of your time. Help us write a review on Apple Podcast. Share it. Make it your Instagram stories. I want to see my feed filled up with Instagram stories about this episode, because this episode is going to be epic. We delayed it for about 4 weeks, but we're going to have a fantastic episode today. All right, but before we get there, we're going to talk about my visit to the Nagahara Pen Clinic today. Before we get there, we do have some things that we want to cover, and also just tease out the suspense a little longer. So, Jacob, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, so normally you're the one doing all the acquisitions or the bulk of them, but I think this time maybe I got more pens because I've been a bit of a sort of pilot shopping spree, and I partially blame Leo for that. So in the episode with Leo, we talked, or I mentioned this signature nib, and because I read about it in Tsunami-san's book, or it was briefly mentioned in Tsunami-san's book, and I couldn't find it. But then Leo said that they're not actually that uncommon, especially you can find them in pocket pens. So I started searching again, and suddenly I found one on Mercari for a fantastic price. So I just bought that one. I think the pen is the Pilot Super 200. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it doesn't say as far as I know on the pen, but looking at photos online, it seems to be a Super 200. Now, let's talk about the nib first and then the filling systems. So I got it because I was interested in this signature nib, and I would sort of describe it as somewhere between, you know, a B and a BB, or a pilot B or BB in thickness. But the thing is, like normally when you think of a broad nib, you sort of associate that with kind of smoother writing experience, right? But this nib, I would describe as quite feedbacky. Now, if you look at it up close with like a macro lens or a loop, it looks like it's perfectly aligned. It doesn't look like there's any problem with it, like anyone has tried to do any bad grind or anything. It looks perfect, right? But it's clearly faceted, and when you write with it, there's definitely feedback. I would even say more feedback definitely more feedback than modern B nibs. Did you get a chance to write with this pen?
I have not, because when you got this pen and you told me it's a switch filler, I said, wow, great, do you have a sack for it? And you're like, what's a sack? I eyedroppered it. And I told you that you were crazy because that would make it leak. You said, no leaking so far. So you eyedroppered the switch filler, and I was very suspicious. And we met on, I think, Monday or something.
Yeah.
And you hand me this pen. The first thing I do is I open it up because I want to see what kind of switch filler doesn't leak when you eyedropper it. And it leaks all over my hands. So, it's been in quarantine.
Right. So I got a pen and I was very impatient. I wanted to write with it, and a very quick research suggested that there would be some kind of sack. I couldn't see clearly, but as you said, you know, the actual like switch seemed to be stuck. So I'm just gonna eyedropper it, and I did. And when I wrote with it, it wrote just fine. I left it in my Toyota pen tray, no problems. I even carried it in my pen wrap, in my bag, no problems. The moment I handed it over to you, it's like it exploded almost.
Yeah. Or you could have just, you know, dipped it in ink like any other normal person would when they try to, you know, write with pens.
I could have done that.
So, anyways, it's in quarantine right now. It's in my ultrasonic. I could probably already start writing with it, but I do need an extra sack to repair it. The actual filler is no problems at all. It's totally fine. I just need to have a sack and attach it to the nipple, which is going to be a bit hard. But let's see. And hopefully I can get this pen back to you. I know you'll probably let it go. But I do think that it's a pretty cool nib, I would say. And on top of that, I do want to say that I have kind of, you know, pushed it against my fingernail a bit. It feels like a bouncy zoom nib.
Yeah.
It's definitely got a bit of flex, I would say. It's not a flexy pen for sure, but it does have quite a bit of bounce to it.
It does. And it got some bounce and also has quite a bit of feedback. It's an unusual nib. I want to find out more about, you know, what was the idea behind this nib, because all I found was one very brief mention in this book, as I said. So I want to see if I can find anything more about it. But it's an interesting nib.
You should ask Mr. Pilot.
Mr. Pilot, that of course, yeah. There's actually one Wagner event coming up pretty soon. I think in Hamamatsu. I'm not sure I will go, but otherwise maybe at the main pen trading event. In June
or something.
Yes. Anyway, so that was just the first of my pilot pens, and then, as you know, we're both following Kingdom Note, and as many listeners might know, Kingdom Note update their website daily with new second-hand listings, and the most popular second-hand listings, they disappeared in less than 5 seconds. So because usually among like the daily listing, there are like 2 or 3 like really, really good ones. So you have to be rather fast. But that also means that if you do see something, you get an immense amount of FOMO and you kind of have to buy it. So it's very dangerous to follow Kingdom Note. So anyway, I've been watching Kingdom Notes, and I think 1 or 2 days after getting the signature nib, I saw a capless LS for a very good price, and I jumped on that. And I love this pen, CY. This capless LS. It might be one of my favorites already.
I don't understand this pen. I don't understand this pen because, like, I own a capless, and for me, the point of a capless is the click, right? Like, I want to click it and annoy people. I want to go click, 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 and the capless LS doesn't make a sound.
Well, to explain it in terms that Mike Hurley would appreciate and understand, a capless has a Cherry MX blue switches. A capless LS has Topre or Cherry MX red switches. You still have a bit of tactile feedback, but it's linear and it's very smooth. I'm not sure if you got that reference.
I disagree. Okay. I got the reference, but I disagree. I disagree because, I mean, you do get a bit of a tactile feedback when you press down, right? There is a bit of resistance when you actually click it, even though it does make a click, which is awful. But then when you retract the nib, right?
Yeah.
That's the most unsatisfying thing ever.
But it's very quiet and luxury. It's perfect for the boardroom.
You know what I want?
Right.
That's what I want.
But the clicking mechanism aside, there's something that makes the LS feel more premium. I can't put my finger on it. It might just be the extra heft, or it might be the shape. I'm not sure, but it feels very. It does feel very premium.
I think it was redesigned. It was redesigned from the regular capless. It is heavier, and the clip is different. It is more sleek.
Yeah,
and on top of that, I have to say that the way they did their black coating and trimming, having it all matte, it does feel good in the hands.
And also, it's also a very small detail, but the fact that it's matte black but with a small red stripe on one side.
Yeah, there's like only one like little red part, right?
That combination, like matte black and with a little red stripe, to me that feels like a pen that an admiral at a Death Star would use. It's been probably my most used pen this week, and I mean, it might be the honeymoon. I might end up selling it. You know how I am. But right now, I'm in a capless LS honeymoon.
Yep.
Anyway, that was still just the second one, and then just 1 or 2 days later, I got another Kingdom Note notification, and this time it was an 845 with a double.
Wait, before
sorry, go ahead.
Before you get there though, because I do want to say that these Kingdom Notes, they are kind of annoying because they send an email out, right? They send an email out, but when they send the email, it's already too late.
Yes. It's too late for the good stuff. It's too late. I mean, not for everything. Some of the listings end up there for a day or even more. But the good stuff, what you really want, goes, as I said, like in 5 seconds or less.
But the thing is, it's not even that. It's that they update the website at 12. They send the email at 12:10, so you're already 10 minutes late.
Yeah.
So once I was literally in Kingdom Note, I was in the store. I was in the physical store.
Yeah.
I received the email at like 12:10.
Right.
And instantly I go to the counter and said, I want this pen. But which was, by the way, an Ebonite King of Pen for like $300.
Yeah.
And like, oh no, it's already sold. And I was like, why did you send the email then? Why do you bother? That's annoying. But yes, anyways, you have a clever solution around that.
Yeah, I'm getting a push notification on my phone the moment they update the website, which is a double-edged sword, right? The good thing is, the good thing and the bad thing is that I see the good stuff very early, and I end up buying a bit too much.
Yeah.
Anyway, yes. So I have 2 more Kingdom Notes acquisitions. So I, like 1 or 2 days late after the capless LS, I saw an 845. I've been looking for an 845 with a double broad nib. There are various listings. Like a few months ago, there were some really good listings on Mercari, but Mercari has gone pretty bad recently. Most of the listings now are just way too expensive.
And boring.
Boring and expensive. But then there was one on Kingdom Note for a very good price. Well, pretty good price for an almost new pen, so I had to get that too. But this pen I haven't actually inked up yet. I need to sell some pens before I allow myself to even ink it up. So it's sitting there in a box. I can't say much about this pen yet. I don't allow myself to use it yet.
All right.
And then finally, 1 or 2 days later again, I got a notification, and it was a Custom Heritage 912. And here the price was...
And this one goes to me, right?
Yes, because the price was so good that I knew that either I buy it right now on the spot without reading the full description, without looking at all the photos, or...
Yeah, which is what you need to do.
Right. So I didn't even see what nib it was. I just saw Custom 912, fantastic price, I need this. I bought it. And it turns out it was a music nib, and I hate music nibs, so yeah, you're gonna get it.
Excellent. So I'm very, very happy.
You can do your Flexilicious thing for your customers with it.
Or maybe I should stack it.
Didn't you already do that? The music and there was some.
I did that on a platinum. By the way, I'm seeing a Emperor for 30,000 right now. Should I get it?
On Mercury, right?
On Mercari.
Yeah, that one went down from 40, but it's just a regular like M or B, right? It has a tab, but it doesn't have an interesting nib.
Yeah, it has a tab, but it's an MF. But I have interesting nibs.
By all means. Go ahead.
God damn it. Anyways, so I have been spending some time on Mercari, as they say.
Mercari.
By the way, there is a Mercari in the US, and they're very similar, but I think their UX is actually better than the one in Japan. Japan has more interesting stuff though. But anyways, so with that. Now that's my second pilot. My second sailor. I also bought another sailor with Fude de Mannen from one of my favorite sellers, Paru-san.
Ah, yes. She, I think, has a lot of interesting listings and usually good prices.
Yeah. She has a lot of zoom nibs, a lot of like exclusives. So I bought this Tsutaya Shoten. It's like a Tsutaya Iro. It's like this green shimmery color pen that the pen I'm going to sell, the nib I'm going to take, so it's perfect. I can swap the MF nib into this pen.
Is that friendship pen? So there was it's been like 1 or 2 like Tsutaya Takashimaya friendship pens, right?
I'm not sure. There's no mention of Takashimaya on the description of the pen, but it is pretty cool. It's Tsudairo, and it's Naginata Fude de Mannen. And the reason why I wanted to get this is because I don't actually own a Sailor Fude de Mannen, so I do want to try it. And apparently, okay, so I'm reading it now. It says it's the 2nd year anniversary pen for Tsudaya's Daikanyama shop, limited to 50 pieces.
But hold on, didn't you get a Fude de Mannen that someone like bent back?
Yeah, I did, and I sold it.
that was hilarious.
Yeah, that was oof. But I'm seeing that Paru-san has another pen which is actually really, really beautiful. It is Bisei Ginga from Usagiya, and this looks like a full-size Pro Gear with a music nib.
I think I saw that one,
yeah. Yeah, it is very, very pretty, but it is expensive.
Yeah, there are many temptations on the second-hand markets here.
I know, right? I know. But I have been also welding. I welded my first 2-stack Sailor, which was a great success. I feel like the shape is actually easier to weld than Platinums. So I'll probably move the Emperor onto that pen.
So now that you've been doing some welding, what have you learned so far? I mean, what is easy, what is difficult, and what makes two nibs easy to weld? The
shape of the nib is really important. Whether the top part of the pen, top part of the nib and the bottom part of the nib stacked together. That's really important. I think that's probably the challenge that most people are running into, is that the nibs don't stack perfectly. So the welding in itself obviously depends on the way that you weld it, but the welding in itself, I would say, cutting the nib and the tipping so that they fit onto each other perfectly is the most difficult. Because if you read the article that I wrote, there are roughly three kind of thoughts on how to stack the nibs. The first one is kind of like the oldest one, which I called it like the old style, and that's a bit more simplistic. It's probably how most people are stacking nibs right now, and that's, I would say, very basic, I suppose, but not very you get less nib, I guess. I don't know how to say it, but I think it looks a bit less interesting. I've done that style on my what do you call it, the platinums that I stacked in Concord, because the platinum nibs don't have such a large bump on the top. And so that's something that I have done before. There's a zure style, which gets you a even larger flat point, but sacrifices most of the nib. And there's the new style, which is the hook style, which is the one that I am doing right now. And because I'm trying to hook the nibs onto each other, that does increase the difficulty by a lot.
So I'm wondering, because for the second nib, you're only really using like the tipping in a very small part of the nib. Like, so considering that, given that there are some vintage nibs that are quite small but yet have a large amount of tipping. So for example, like these Pilot Super 200 nibs, like the nibs themselves are quite small, but you can find Pilot Super 200 nibs with coarse nibs, right? So would it be possible to take, say, like the base nib being like a regular Pilot size 15, but for the second layer use one of those old nibs with a big tipping?
That is so interesting that you ask, because I have just done one.
Okay, so the answer is yes, then I guess.
But you need to find a nib that fits perfectly, that can stack to each other. So the bottom side and the top side have to align.
Right.
I'm also thinking maybe I should weld some nibs together and make like a gold nib style parallel pen, which I think would be hilarious.
Oh, yeah, that would be good.
Yeah. So anyways, we're going to talk more about stacking nibs later, but we do want to get to some news. Kingdom Note has shocked the world yet again with their latest bird series, their bird-themed pens. And these are Pro Gear Minis, not to be confused with the Pro Gear Slims. Now, Pro Gear Minis are basically mini versions of the full-size pen. So you get a full-size, fully swappable 21K nib. You can swap this onto your Pro Gears. You can even swap the section out with your Pro Gear and your 1911 Ls. And so they are much more rare. Something that I do want to note is that these Pro Gear Minis have still the back threading.
The threading, yeah.
And the Pro Gear Slim Minis, the ones that Ancora are releasing, those have been redesigned to remove that back threading. So there is a difference between those two models. And so anyways, they've released the first of the series, which is the Kingfisher. And this Kingfisher Kawasami pen, it's kind of cute. A lot of people like it.
I haven't seen any photos yet, but is this the first time that Kingdom Note is doing a full size mini? They did this like sea slug pens. They were slim minis, right?
I think the sea slugs were slim minis, but then the little amoebas that they recently had, those are full size. Okay. Yeah. And well-known scalper, which I won't name yet because we might do a full episode on them very soon. They've already started to scalp this pen and to sell it.
Of course.
Yeah, but it is a fairly cute pen. I've just sent the link over to your line so you can see it, but it's quite cute. I think they did nail the color blocking on this one. It kind of looks like the May pen from Ancora, but with an orange section, and is of course it's full size. So yeah, it's quite good.
There's a bit of translucency there on the barrel, right?
Yes.
So what I like about Kingdom Note sailors is they're not always what you would necessarily call the most beautiful pens, but I think they do some interesting experiments with colors, like the vegetable pens, right? I think they're a bit more wild than some of the other retailers.
For sure. And they kind of started this like store exclusive thing, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with their original store exclusive inks.
And they're doing so many of them. I don't know any retailer that's doing so many store exclusive sailor inks and pens as Kingdom Notes.
Well, the good thing about Kingdom Note, or I don't know if it's good for the consumer, but the smart thing about Kingdom Note is that they only release them in series. And most of their series have like 5 or 6 of them. So, you see one that you really like and all of a sudden you have 5 different pens.
Gotta catch them all.
And they're so cute. They're so darn cute.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in other news, we do have some kind of news about EMS.
Yes, I saw this in my newsfeed a few days ago. So the main topic, or at least if you look at Japan Post's own announcement, the main topic was that they have increased the prices for their EMS shipping. So depending on the weight, it's like between like 400 and up to several thousand yen of extra fees, shipping fees. But then, like, by the way, they said from June we're gonna start resume EMS shipping to the US. And I think for many of our listeners, I think that's the more interesting part here, that they are going to resume EMS shipping to the US. Now, I mean, both of us know that, and both of us are using Yamato for shipping to the US, and I think now the prices are going to be almost equal. So for us, there's no real point probably in using EMS. But I think if you are buying from like Nagahara or many of the other retailers that offer international shipping, they don't offer Yamato, right? They usually offer Japan Post or like expensive courier options like DHL or FedEx, right? So if you're buying from those places, I think this is going to be very good news.
Yeah, I would say that the only positive thing about this is shipping inks. Otherwise, I really don't see a reason to use EMS, especially since the price is going to be increased. So it's on parity with Yamato, who ships by UPS. What I would like them to do is reopen to Canada, please. I really want to ship stuff to Canada with some tracking.
It's a bit unclear because if you look at Japan Post's own announcement, they talk about like North America, but then if you go to their listing of like available like shipping options by country, they're still saying that Canada is not available. So I don't think there's any change for Canada, but I would love to be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Japan.
Yeah, but because you can send like to Japan from most of these countries, right?
Yeah,
the other way for some reason doesn't work. And I know that our friend Hiroko Bokomondo is struggling with this because obviously she also has customers in like Canada and elsewhere, and shipping is becoming a headache for her.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, Japan Post, we want to ship to Canada.
That would be lovely.
And we're going to enter a third state of emergency. And by the way, I want to take some time here to make some political commentary on the Japanese government.
I sense a 1-star review coming up now.
So, I have to say that, first of all, COVID is not a hoax. If you think it's a hoax, probably you need to go on Google and search coronavirus. But given that COVID is not a hoax, we have to look at how other countries are doing as a benchmark, I think. And as far as I'm aware, Japan is the worst island country. The worst island country. And why I emphasize that is because Japan, being an island country, has full control over its borders, right? So we could have been Taiwan, right? We could have been Australia. We could have been New Zealand, right? Those countries or regions or whatever you want to call them. I don't want to get into an argument about that, right? That's not the point. I'm talking about COVID. But those places have literally had like 8, 9, 10 months without local transmission, right? They go around maskless in their little island paradises. And Japan, because instead of having something strict at the beginning, we decided to encourage people to travel. We had over 1,000 cases in Osaka yesterday. So while we could have been Australia and New Zealand, instead we decided to be the UK.
In a way, it's actually worse.
It's worse.
In a specific sense, because in Japan, apparently there's requirement for vaccine trials to be done in Japan. And that is the reason why so far only the Pfizer vaccine has been approved in Japan. The other ones are still undergoing trials in Japan.
Yeah.
While they've been approved everywhere else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of like per capita, right? For every 100 people, Japan has one person vaccinated. One person vaccinated. This is absolutely just infuriating, honestly. Like the UK has 64% vaccination. We have 1.7. So, I mean, the Japanese government does many things right, such as healthcare and insurance. But, I mean, please, for the love of humanity, please, just do some strict lockdown. We're going to go into the third lockdown. But what does that mean for retailers and for events?
Every state of emergency is slightly different than the previous one. And we're actually already in a sort of semi-state of emergency.
Exactly.
They call it something else, and it's hard to keep track of what exactly is happening. But this time, starting tomorrow or Monday, I think, they are now saying that establishments that are selling alcohol or karaoke bars, they have to close completely. And big department stores, I think over 1,000 square meters or something like that, they are asking them to close. So many of the big department stores in Tokyo, Takashimaya, Mitsukoshi, and so on, they are actually going to either close completely or they're going to close everything except for the grocery stores.
Which, by the way, makes no sense at all, because if you've gone to these department stores, you'll know that the upstairs is empty. Nobody is going upstairs. People are going downstairs to the supermarket. That's where it's crowded.
That's true.
So these measures make absolutely no sense. And again, we could have been Australia, but we're choosing to be the UK. So worse, because we have no vaccinations. So
Bongbox is going to close, even though it's not exactly 1,000 square meters.
And it's empty all the time.
Yeah, there's that too. But Bongbox is going to close. Some events are going to be postponed. So I know that there's going to be this YY Pen Day in, Kobe, I think?
That's right.
And that's going to be postponed. And also Nagahara was going to have a pen clinic at Nagasawa, and that's also going to be...
That's right. And YY
postponed,
too. Yeah. Do you know if their e-commerce shops will still open?
I don't know for sure, but I kind of assume that.
Yeah.
because I mean, obviously the Hamamatsu one is probably going to be up and running. I think most of the e-commerce is been like the logistics are managed from Hamamatsu.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. And I mean, we're all tired of the pandemic. You have pandemic fatigue. I have pandemic fatigue. Everybody has pandemic fatigue. But just the fact that, we are so hell-bent on running the Olympics, right? Which is, by the way, hilarious. I wonder what the officials, like, who actually work there, do they actually seriously think it's going to happen? But, we're so hell-bent on having these Olympics that we are forgetting to do anything else. So, it's just a shame. We could have been maskless running around now, but...
Yeah, maybe. But one more thing that's going to happen from tomorrow is that as part of the state of emergency, you are not required, but you're asked not to travel between prefectures.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why the state of emergency is right now is that we are just about to like the Golden Week is about to start, which is one of the 2 times a year where Japanese people are traveling a lot.
And they're allowed to take time off from work. It's a 10-day holiday. Well, not really. It's 5 days, but then most people take like 3 days off and make it a 10-day holiday.
So I was actually thinking of maybe going to Hiratsuka for a pilot's Makie museum, but I probably won't do that now because of the state of emergency. So some other day, some other time.
Yeah, it's just very frustrating. Japan does a lot of good things, to be honest. Japan, it's a great country to live in, but I think if something out of the ordinary or the expected happens, we're awful.
Yeah.
Anyways, so
on to the main topic.
So prior to the main topic, I did want to talk a little bit about my Kansai trip because a lot of people had pretty good reactions to my Kansai trip. So I think 4 or 5 weeks ago, I went to Kansai just alone, myself for 2 days. I visited 4 cities and hit up some of the stores there. I wasn't able to go to every single one of them, but I did Nagasawa, I did Pen and Message, I did Sankodo, and a lot of people like that. So if you are interested in seeing those shops, I do have it saved on my story highlights. If you look at my highlight, I believe it says Japan Pen Shops. You'll be able to see all these pen shops in Japan and how they're set up and the kind of variety that they have. But on top of that, actually, I think the week after, I went to Bungbox because Nagahara was having a pen clinic there. And usually I don't go to those pen clinics because I don't, for lack of a better phrasing, I don't really, how should I say this? I don't have a need to go to Nagahara to get my nibs ground. I just don't need to go. So I usually don't because he's quite expensive. But I did have a few customers who wanted specifically a Nagahara grind. So I booked 2 slots with Nagahara. And I'm quite glad that I did because I was able to get a lot of interesting information out of him. So, Jacob, you went last time. You asked him a bunch about like zoom nibs and cross nibs. So I kind of wanted to make a follow-up. And now, you hadn't seen any of these answers until like yesterday or something. I
still haven't seen the answers, so I don't know what you talked about with him.
All right, so this is Jacob Reacts to Things. I need your reactions, okay? So, last time you and he had this kind of discussion about overseas people making cross points. And I just wanted to follow up with that with him as well. And so obviously he's never, or I don't know if it's obvious, but he's never actually written with cross points that were made by makers overseas. So I asked him, I said, what do you think? And he says that they look very nice, especially Monty Winfield. Said looked really, really nice, and he'd never written with one. I think he would enjoy that. So, Monty, if you're listening, Nagahara may be interested in trying one of your stacked nibs. But I asked him specifically, I said, what do you think when people stack nibs and call them cross points? Do you appreciate that, or do you think they should call it something else if it's
Right.
It's like not made by you or by Sailor? And he said something very interesting. He said, well, just like when I make a nib and the nib's shape is, fatter horizontally and thinner vertically, right? That's an architect. And if I make a nib that is thinner horizontally and fatter vertically, that's an italic. So if you stack two nibs together, that's a cross point. And he kind of said it in this matter-of-fact way. He's like, yeah, I want them to call it cross point because that's what it is. And he said that one of the reasons why he would like other people to call them cross points is because he believes this actually leaves a legacy for Nagahara Sr., right? Because Nagahara Sr. Made this nib, invented this nib, and the more people who call it cross point, the more people who are doing this, it's kind of like a legacy for Nagahara Sr. And his work kind of lives on in what he's created. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is interesting, and I remember hearing something similar from him about the Naginata Togi nibs. I can't remember what the context was, but we were talking about the new names that he had come up with his grinds when he couldn't call them Naginata Togi for copyright reasons or to make sure Sailor doesn't get upset. But there was clearly some amount of resentment about that, because in his view that's not Sailor's name, that is his father's name. He came up with the grind. He came up with a name, like Sailor sort of he has happened to be working at Sailor at the time. Now obviously maybe Nagahara isn't entirely up to date on intellectual property law, but there's clearly an amount of resentment towards Sailor in what he's saying.
And what's really curious, and we might have even said this on the podcast before, but Sailor used to call Naginata nibs, they used to call them Nagahara nibs. And so if you use a Wayback Machine, you can actually find, up until just very recently, I think up until 2017, all of the pages referred to Naginatas as Nagahara nibs. And now sometime around 3-4 years ago, they redesigned their website and they scrubbed all of the references to Nagahara nibs. So now you can't find that name anymore.
Is that around the same time as they changed the engraving on the nib?
It is. Yep. And so, of course, I had to ask him, had he made stacked nibs in Sailor? He said, yeah, I've made stacked nibs before. So I said, well, why don't you make stacked nibs now? I mean, would you want to? And he said that he wouldn't want to make stacked nibs anymore, not because he can't make them, but because it might cause some issues with the manufacturers. Because if I get a stacked nib from Nagahara today, right? And then I sell this pen. He, obviously I know, and I'll bring it back to Nagahara, but maybe 20 years later, the other person doesn't know, and all they see is on the nib, it's imprinted Sailor. So 20 years later, they bring it to Sailor and say, what the heck, this isn't ours, and we're not going to deal with it. So it might create problems down the line, and that's why he doesn't want to do that.
That's similar to what he said to me, and I remember he was talking about this episode when he was still working at Sailor, and some nibmeister in Taiwan had made a stacked nib from some Japanese nibs, and the pen manufacturer found out about that and contacted Sailor and asked, what's going on here? Did Nagahara do this? So I think he wants to maintain also sort of good relationships with, especially with Japanese manufacturers.
Yeah, at least he wants to avoid like troubles and yeah, it's we call it in Japanese, we say mendokusai, which means it's a pain in the butt, and he just doesn't want to deal with that. And I remember last time you asked him what he thought about the kind of skyrocketing prices of these stack nibs.
Yeah.
You said he found it a bit amusing.
Yeah.
I followed up with that, and I asked, what do you think about people, selling these older naginatas for ridiculous prices? He told me that he actually doesn't like it. And he said if I bring a grind to him and then I resell that grind, right? So I bring a pen to him, he grinds it, and then I resell it. He's totally fine with that. And his argument is that because if I bring it to a pen clinic, I've paid him directly.
Right.
But the nibs that he did at Sailor, right? Sailor didn't pay him for making those nibs. I mean, they paid him a salary, but they didn't pay him like anything, extra or on top for these nibs.
There was no nib related performance bonus.
No. So in a way, if you sell for extra, according to Nagahara, that's kind of like profiting off of his work, and he didn't get anything for that. So he thinks it's okay if I bring him a Zoom nib, I ask him to grind it, and then I resell. And apparently people are doing this. People send like 6 nibs to Junior, ask him to grind it, and then go out and resell it. And he's totally fine with that because he's received the money. He's received what he thinks is fair compensation. But essentially what he's said is that at Sailor, he didn't receive fair compensation for those nibs that he did.
Yeah, it all goes back to his resentment towards Sailor, which comes back every single time you talk to him.
Yeah. I also asked him, so, Sailor made these stack nibs. Why didn't other manufacturers do this? Because it's kind of a great idea, right? It's cool. And his answer was because it's very expensive.
Yeah.
And so that piqued my curiosity because I was like, well, yes, they are very expensive, but if it were so expensive, then why did Sailor do them? And he told me that when Nagahara Sr. created the first stack nibs, he kind of he kept it a secret from Sailor. So just in his little, working room, in his office or something, cutting away at nibs.
The Nagahara Skunk Works project.
Yeah, and nobody kind of knew what he was doing, but he was just, doing them and then selling them to his customers that he met at pen clinics. And then word kind of got out. And by the time Sailor found out, they were already popular. So they were forced into making them because customers kept on asking for these. So he was like, yeah, well, Sailor didn't have a choice. But in terms of the other manufacturers, it's a very expensive and sometimes wasteful exercise. So the other manufacturers didn't want to do it. And so
he has mentioned the yield before, right? Because for every stack nib, you're going to ruin a few nibs. And sure, you can probably use that gold, but still there's some cost associated with getting those back into nibs.
Yeah, and so I asked him what he thought about the Sailor price increases. And he said, well, finally, they're increasing the prices to what these things are actually worth. So he's actually happy that they're increasing their prices. Because he thinks that Sailor pens were too cheap back in the day. Which is interesting because they were in line with the other manufacturers. In fact, and I asked him specifically, I said, but if you look at Platinum's 3776, those nibs are bigger And yet it's, half the price of a Sailor of a comparable nib. And he said that Nakata Shacho, so President Nakata, did a lot of work on cost reduction. And
including QC?
Well, we didn't specifically talk about that, but he did say that he respected Nakata-san a lot because Nakata-san actually went into the business and tried to reduce the costs to keep profits, whereas Sailor kind of just ran wild and undersold their pens.
Oh,
which I am not sure if I agree. I think that if they need to sell it at that price, this business is not, very efficient. So there are definitely, I think, issues with factory efficiency in Sailor, but Nagahara says that he actually thinks Sailor is doing the right thing because it's finally getting up to what it actually costs to make them. Obviously, when we say costs, Sailor also has to pay its employees.
It sounds like there's almost an implicit assumption here from his end that this would mean that they're going to pay their nib workers a bit better.
Well, let's see. Have no comment on that, but I did ask him. So, what other manufacturers? What overseas manufacturers does he like?
Oh, I see.
And he gave me this really interesting answer. He said, "I don't know. I don't write." I don't write with pens.
But I wonder if that is true or if it's just his Oyaji humor.
I think that is actually true because his handwriting is actually awful. But while he doesn't really care about other manufacturers and other pens, he says he respects Pelikan. He says Pelikan still grinds as if grinding is a bit of an art form, whereas Mont Blanc is just very much factory. Which to me is so interesting because you always hear about issues on Pelikan nibs.
Well, during a certain period of time, right? Is that still the case? I thought that there was just like Visconti, there was a certain time when they had problems.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact time frame, but he said that I think he said a few years ago. For a man of his age, I don't know if a few years ago means 2019 or 2010. Right. But he said a few years ago he went out and bought Pelikans because he wanted to study to check how Pelikan was grinding their nibs. He did the same for Mont Blanc, and he was disappointed in Mont Blanc's grinds. Yeah.
But I would also assume that given that he's now a nib worker, he's in Japan, I would assume that just based on the kind of pens that he gets to work on from his customers, he gets a lot more exposure to Pelikan pens than say your regular Jovo or box sticks.
In Japan, that is probably true. Yeah. I also asked him, and this was a question from a listener, I asked him if he was interested in pen design or if he wanted to design his ideal pen. And he said, "I'm not interested in that because I don't use pens. I don't write."
There you go. Yeah, I see.
But I did ask him, what was the split between people asking for grinds and adjustments? Because we have, on this podcast had lengthy discussions about how grinding is not really a thing in Japan. And he said that he gets about 50-50 in terms of the percentage. He says that half the people ask him for just, flow adjustments and the other half ask him to grind stuff. And then he singled out, he said, a lot of the customers are young ladies. He said they're young ink Numa ladies who, start playing with the ink, start playing with the glass pens, and then they kind of evolve or move on to fountain pens. And these ink Numa ladies, they bring it to him first for adjustment, and and then they see on his Twitter, all these, crazy different other grinds, and then they start asking for those. So he says that's the general pattern.
Because we know, we talked about that before, but we know that he actually made a special grind for Betchuri, right? He took a regular sailor Furidemannen and he turned that into some kind of more suitable for monoline. So I wouldn't be surprised if Betchuri's many followers are asking for similar grinds.
Yeah, I haven't actually seen Betchuri write with that. So I do really want to see him write with that one day. But yeah, I'm sure that there are a lot of Inknuma ladies who are seeing those fat, wet nibs that Nagahara's doing, and also then associating with, I want to play with inks. So that is definitely a thing. But speaking of fat, wet inks, I asked him I asked him if he were to give advice for up-and-coming grinders, what would he say? And this answer I think is super interesting. He said, if you want to make a living from grinding pens, if you're serious about grinding pens, then I'm always willing to give you some advice, to teach you, to train you. But only if you want to take it seriously and if you see that as a future. Specifically, we use the words, if you want to eat off of this.
Right.
And so he pointed out Matthew Pactagon on Instagram as somebody who thought was taking grinding very, very seriously. And he said that him and Masayama and I think someone else, I don't remember the third person, but three of the big nib grinders put in a strong recommendation for Matthew to John Modishaw. That was very interesting. And he said, if you really are serious about making a living off of pens and off of grinding, come to me. And he said, if you want to make a career out of this, what you should do is not grind all of these complex grinds. Don't even think about Naginata. Go grind some fine points. He said, fine points are the hardest to grind, specifically on the upstroke, to make it not scratchy on that upstroke, and having a very, very fine point, that is very difficult. So make perfect fine points, and then you can start thinking about grinding other shapes.
It almost sounds like some kind of like a wax on, wax off kind of advice. Make sure you really master the basics before you try the fancy stuff.
Yeah, it's very much like sushi chefs, isn't it? Where people are they're making the rice for 30 years before they can touch fish.
Right.
And very, very interestingly, I think you will find this super interesting. I asked, of all the nibs that you are making right now, you have the Nagahara Special, you have the Beak Point, blah, 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 blah. There's one nib grind that I don't see on your price list. And if you want to talk about fine points, I want to talk about what's happening to the Saibitogi.
Right.
Because if you go on his website, you won't find Saibitogi available for grind.
What he always says, I can do a needle point. If you ask about Saibitogi, he says, I do a needle point.
Yes. And this is the interesting story. He says that he got the idea for the Saibitogi when he was in the States. He was in the States doing some kind of a pen show, and he said that he borrowed a pen from a lady called Susan. I believe he's referring to Susan Worth. And he said, and I picked up this pen, and it was just so fine. It was so fine that I had to go and recreate it. So he recreated it, and he called it the Saibitogi. And now he realizes that what he was calling the Saibitogi is just a needlepoint. So just like how he wants people to call the cross points, he says, it makes no sense for me to go out and call it saibitogi. It already existed as a needlepoint.
Right. But wait, so just to make sure I understand, and so we're saying that the saibitogi, it is a Nagahara Junior era nib grind. It was never done by senior.
That's correct. And it's just the same as a needlepoint.
But there is this idea, I think you mentioned it, I've heard other people mentioning it, this idea that the saibitogi is kind of like a reverse naginata.
So I actually, I was confused at first, because it does have that bend downwards, right? So it kind of did look like a mini Concorde.
Right.
But I think in the end, if I consider it very carefully, I think Nagahara's right. It's just a needlepoint. And, the point of that pen was to write the finest line possible. And if you think about it, it's the same as a needlepoint. And he said that pen inspired him to try to make needlepoints that would not catch the nib when you stroke up.
But so who came up with the name saibitogi?
I believe he did. And then, he realized it was just a needlepoint, I guess. So now he's calling them needlepoints.
Interesting.
And there ends my my report of the Nagahara event.
So one thing I'm wondering, going back to what you talked about, these nibs from non-Japanese nib makers. I guess a bit of a tangent, but if you wanted a nib with as much tipping as possible, not just like on the side like a stub, but actually like a drop in order to do a naginata togi, is there any nib maker other than Sailor? Is there any nib maker overseas that has standard production nibs with as much tipping as Sailor, Platinum, and Pilot? I don't mean like special order like Mont Blanc, like 6B, but like in their standard production lines.
I believe that the Pelican M800BB does have enough tipping, but it's not as big as the Zoom nib.
But it's still more stub like, right?
No, it is a drop.
Oh, really?
Drop,
okay.
Yeah. But other than that, not really. I think unless you get Greg Manuskin to retip it.
Yeah, but that's not exactly production line anymore.
No.
Cool. Anyway, this was a very interesting follow-up, and he clearly, like, every time we talk to him, there's so much, like every second answer shows a certain amount of resentment towards Sailor, right?
Yeah, I don't think he fully, I don't think he hates Sailor, but I think there is, as you say, a tinge of regret at the management.
Well, yeah, I think there's sort of two parts to it at least. One is, and he keeps mentioning that the nib workers are underpaid. He also feels like there is this Nagahara senior legacy that he wants to preserve as the Nagahara legacy and not something that's just associated with Sailor.
That's right. And he's very intent on legacy. And respects his father's work a lot. I mean, he recognizes that it's different, but gives his father a lot of credit for starting something with such lasting impact on the industry.
Right.
Yeah.
It's true.
So that's been the episode. Anything else to add?
No, I think that's it. Another very good Nagahara episode. I think we now have a pretty good understanding of his opinions, and we will learn some interesting backstory behind some names and products.
And you know what? For the listeners out there, if you have questions that you want to ask Nagahara, you should comment them on the website that we have. Our website is tokyoinklings.com. You can comment on the website on this episode and say, hey, I want to know this from Nagahara. If you get the chance to talk to him again, can you please ask this question? And, whenever we go to these events, we will try to ask those questions and to find out more, because this is quite interesting for us as well.
Yeah.
All right. So with that said, thank you everybody so much. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram at tokyostationpens, and on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
And my name is Jacob. I'm foodafan on Instagram and on Twitter, and I have a much neglected blog at foodafan.com.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.